Welcome everybody to this lesson, Outline, Text, and Fonts. In this lesson, we are going to be looking at the CSS styling of our outlines, the text, and the fonts in our HTML page that we can have. So what is an outline? An outline is a line drawn outside the element border, right? And it's usually to make the element stand out, more like an emphasis, right? So we can take a quick look at an outline here. So let's get our block together. So, and maybe this time around, let's write the whole HTML from scratch. Okay, so we have our HTML. We're gonna have our head. In here, we're gonna have our style, right? And we're gonna have our body beneath the head. Okay, and in the body, let's just get some, maybe an H2 header, right? And what should we write here? Uh, CSS outline. Okay, and then let's get a paragraph right here, and let's put some lorem in there, right? And for some reason, I like to truncate it so I can see everything when I minimize it. Okay, this should do just all right. Okay, so we have all this set up. And so if I refresh this, you can see you can see what we have from the HTML. So let's add the styling, right? So I'm gonna target the P elements. So the name of the element, curly braces, and so from the box model that we learned, let's just add some stuff to this, right? Let's say background. First, let's add a background color. And I like to use gray, a little light gray, maybe a little bit better. Light gray. Okay, so you can see how it looks like. So you can see the box model of the element. Okay, so let's add our padding. This time I'm going to set it to 20 pixels. And again, so you can see how that works. You can see, right? So we've added our padding. What else should we add? Margin. And if you did not watch the previous video, I would say go back and watch it. Let's leave it on auto for now. By default, that's what it already is, so we are not going to see anything. And then we are going to have our border itself. And I'm going to set this to 2 pixels, solid, maybe blue, not blue, blue. Okay, so when I refresh this, I have my border, I have everything, right? Okay, and if you want to align your text by default, it's already centered, but let's do it. Okay, and refresh. Right, so it's now centered. Okay, so now with the outline, I'm gonna have this property called outline, and then I'm gonna set it to red, just so it stands out. I'm gonna make it solid, and I'm gonna make it 10 pixels, just so we can see. Okay, so if you're ready, that is the outline for this element, right? So you can see it's after the border, the space after the border, it's a 10 pixel width, and it's red, right? Like I have, and it's solid. So again, this is how the outline works. There are various properties that we can use together with the outline, and we have the outline style to select what kind of style you want your outline to be. You have the outline color, the outline width, and the outline offsets, and then just the outline, right? If you want to add everything in one line. Okay, just like with border, when we had the border style, we had values like dotted, dash, solid, double, groove. It's the same with the outline, right? You can have the same values for your outline style, right? So for example, if I wanted an outline style instead of solid, and maybe I could have said dashed, right? And so when I refresh this, you see it as a dashed outline, right? So the very values that we used when we were setting the border style, we can use the same uh, values, right? So you can have it again, we can have the dotted, we can have the dashed, solid, double. If you want the double, we can have that, double. Refresh this. Now you have your double outline. And then if you wanted the groove, it's the same thing. We can have the groove, right? So I refresh this and you have your grooved outline. And then you can have the ridge, you can have your insert, your outsert, and then you can have your none and your hidden. So instead of using this, rather I'm gonna use outline style. Outline style and set this to groove. Okay, so if I refresh this, if I refresh this, the reason why you don't see an outline is that it's there, but it's very small to see, right? So you can see a black around the blue border. That is your outline. So just so it becomes visible, we are going to look at the next property, and that's the outline width, right? So I'm going to set my outline width, and I'm going to make it 6 pixels, right? So if I refresh this, you can see the black being prominent, right? So that is the outline width, right? And it can have values like thin if you want it approximately 1 pixels, medium if you want it approximately 3 pixels, and this 6 pixel one that I just put there is approximately, it's called a thick. So if I didn't want to say 6 or 5 pixels, I could have just used thick, right? And it's gonna give me something similar, right? So you can have values of thin, medium, thick, or you can just use the pixels if you want to be more accurate. So I'm gonna have 5 pixels, right? So we have that. So that is how the outline width works, right? The next one that we would be looking at is the outline color, right? So, and the property is simple, it's just the same outline and color, right? And the value here should be, let's say red. So I'm gonna set red for this. So you can, as you can see, the outline color changed to red. Okay, that is good now, right? So, and the values for the color could be anything, hex, RGB, whatever you want to use, you can use it. to specify the color of your outline. Okay, now we have uh, invert color, right? So if I just say invert, right? It performs a color inversion, right? This ensures that the outline is visible regardless of your background color, right? So if your background color is red, it's gonna give you a color that will show. So it inverts the color of your background. So it gives you that solid invert color, right? So because it's white, the color that was given was black, so it shows, right? So that is it. But we're gonna keep red for now. Okay, right. And then the shorthand, right? So if, and that's what we looked at earlier, if you wanted the shorthand to have your outline style, the width, and the color, you can have it all in one line. And for that, we can write it here again. So you can have your outline and say you want a 10 pixel, sorry, space. Do you want a solid? And maybe you want green, right? So when I refresh this, you have a 10 pixel solid green. So that's a shorthand for that. Okay. So we can also have an outline offsets, right? And this property adds space between an outline and the border of an element, right? So if you wanted space between the border and then the outline, you have to add the outline offsets. So let's try this one. Let's add the outline offsets and let's add say 5 pixels. All right, so if I refresh this, you can see the space between the blue border and then you have the offset of 5 pixels and then your outline showing. The next thing we want to look at is the CSS text. So I'm going to use the same one. So I'm going to say CSS outline, comma, text. Okay, so CSS has a lot of properties for formatting text. And some of this include text color, right? Text alignments, text decoration, text transformation, text spacing, and the text shadow. And then we're going to look at a few of this. So the color property is used to set a color of the text. So for this P here, if I wanted to set the color, and maybe I should just comment this and say text style. Okay, right? And then what I can do here is put the color and then set this to what color do I want? Let's say orange, right? So if I refresh this, orange is the absolute wrong color to use. So I'm instead gonna say red. Maybe this will be better. Okay, so this is better. Right. So the color property is used to set the color of the text. And again, you can use all the color value types as hex, RGB, even the name that we use there, right? You can Google it. You can see a lot of color palettes online and then be able to select the one that you want, right? And then you have the background color, which we already used, and this gives you the background of your text, right? So in this case, we used background color light gray, but we could have used background color, and let's be bold here. Let's say black, right? So if I refresh this, you have a background color of black. So that is another property, background color, right? And then we have text alignment, and this is used to align your text. And again, it's used to align the text in the context of your container, right? So a text can either align left or right or center, or you can justify it, right? So let's try to align this. So the property is called text align, and I'm gonna choose, this is already centered, but I'm gonna choose center. So you see no change. Now let's say left, right? So it's now aligned left. So if I say right, refresh this, it's aligned to the right, right? So we have all this, and you can have justify also, justify. Good. So this justifies the text. Each line is stretched so that every line has equal width, right? And the left and right margins are straight. That's what the justify is. So we have the text align, and then we have the text direction, which I don't think we use it often, but the direction and Unicode BDI properties can be used to change the direction of an element. Okay, so let's just say, and maybe this time I should target the H2 elements because that's easier to read because it's not in Spanish, or what do they call it. Okay, so H2, great. And then in here, I'm gonna say direction RTL, right? And then when I refresh this, it goes great. And then next thing, I'm gonna use the Unicode by direction, BIDI, and the value is override. Okay, so when I refresh this, you can see that it has changed the direction of your test. So you can see the CSS, right? OUT outline, right? And then TEXT, right? So I don't think we're really gonna use this much, but it is worth knowing. Okay, so I can just comment this out. So we have it visible and readable. So that is the text direction, right? And then we have alignment. You can have vertical alignment, right? Which is a property that sets the vertical alignment of an element, right? So with this, I can just, let's align the P text. So I can say vertical align, and I'll say base, a value of baseline, right? And then another value that you can have is the text top. Nice. And then we have the text bottom, right? So this is already centered, and also you cannot see the difference. But if you align and justify this, you can see the alignment of your image, whether you want to do images or text, it aligns it within the vertical space, right? So this is also worth knowing. Okay, so the next one, and which one is text decoration, is also a property that is used to set or remove decorations from text. For example, when you have like underlines from links and stuff and you want to remove it, you can use it. So for example, let's just create one here. Uh, let's create down here under this paragraph. I'm gonna create another P, and I'm gonna say link to the internet. Okay, and then I'm gonna have, so right here I can have an A tag, href, and then I'm gonna put in there http www dot say google.com. Okay, okay, and then I'm gonna say google.com. Okay, great. So let me refresh this again, and I have link to the internet and then google.com right underneath this one, right? And you can see that because I just style the P style, and that is affecting this P element down here also, but that's fine. We still see the link and then the underline over there. So in order to use the text decoration, so let's remove any decoration on this text, right? So I can just say on a target the A tag, so A elements, and in here I'm going to say text decoration, and then instead of a value I'm just going to say none, meaning remove any decoration on the google.com text, right? So no underlines, nothing. So when I refresh this, you can see that it goes off. You can see any underline. So that is what text decoration does. Well, other values are possible, right? So none says you don't want any text decoration, but if we wanted some other type of decoration, like overline, right? You can set this overline, and then it puts a line on top, right? If you wanted line through, so line through the text, right? You can have line through, and then it goes all the way through. So I guess you understand what is happening. And if you wanted to specifically state it, you can have your underline, which is gonna underline your text, right? So you can have your underline like before, right? So this is your text decoration. If you wanted to transform your text in terms of uppercase, lowercase, you can also do that. You can use the property called text transform together with values of uppercase, lowercase, or capitalize to set uppercase or lowercase letters in your text. So for example, if I wanted to uppercase all my H2, right, which is my header, I could do that. And the property here that I have to use is the text transform, and I'm gonna say upper case. So give me all the uppercase of this. So you can see now it's all in uppercase, right? If you wanted to do the reverse, you can set all to lowercase, right? And then when I refresh this, it's all in lowercase. And then you can have it also as capitalized if you wanted to capitalize them all, right? So we are back. So you can see that there's a capital letter at the beginning of all the letters, right? So that is how we can use text transformation. And then we have text spacing, right? Property. And so in order to have spacing within text, the property that we are going to use is called text indentation. For example, if you wanted to indent your text a little bit, you can use text indent property, right? And then set the value of the amount of space you want to leave. So let's do that. So for this P here, let's style this P here. Let's add a text indent, right? Text indent, and the value is, let's put a 50 pixel indentation here, right? And I did not spell it right. Okay, so if I refresh this, you can see that it indented your text by 50 pixels, right? And then the letter spacing, if you wanted spacing between your letters itself, you can do it. You use the letter spacing property and this add space between the characters in your text, right? So in the same P, I'm going to add your letter spacing property, and I'm going to set it to 3 pixels. Okay, so the spacing that comes out of this. So that is your letter spacing, right? And another thing you can also have, and I'm trying to breeze through this before I get to the 30-minute mark, is your line height, right? And the line height property is used to specify the space between lines, right? So uh, the the line on top and the line below, what is the space between it? So you can have your line height, and then I'm going to set 0.7 in here, right? So if I refresh this, you can see that the line spacing has reduced. If we wanted to go, let's be bold and go 1 pixel, right? Right, so you can see how the line spacing increases as you change this value. Okay, so that is your line height. Now, you also have the spaces between words, right? So a word is a bunch of characters and then a space and another word. So that space between words is where we want to tag it. And that is a property called word, and you guessed it, spacing, right? And so I'm gonna set 10 pixels for this, right? So if I refresh this again, you can see that the spacing between words has changed. Just so we can be bold so you can see the difference, I'm going to go 20 pixels and you can see how the spacing between words has changed, right? So let us do this. Let's do this 10, right? Just so it's a little better. Okay, so that is your word spacing property. And also you can have white space, right? So white space property specifies how white space inside an element is handled, right? And uh, most people just want to wrap the white space, right? So you can handle your white space no matter however you want, right? So for example, let's take an example so we are aware. So I'm just gonna leave a lot of white space here. Okay, let's just leave a lot of white space. Yeah. So the values here that we can set for this, I'm gonna say white space. Oh, and that's for the P, right? Good. So I'm gonna have my white space, and I'm gonna say no wrap. Good. And then you can see if I scroll, it doesn't wrap your space. It doesn't wrap, right? So it just goes on and on. It does not wrap, right? So that is how this works, the no wrap value, right? So that is what if I have my normal and it becomes normal, it wraps around the content and then the space, and that looks good, right? So that is your white space values. You can have inherit, onset, pre-wrap, pre-line, all that, right? So we're just gonna do normal, which is the default. Okay, so that is your white space. Okay, going forward, we are gonna also have uh, how do we use text shadow, right? So if you wanted to shadow your text, uh, which property to use is called text shadow, and it adds some shadow to your text. And it's simplest to use. You can specify the horizontal shadow and then the vertical shadow, right? So let's just take a simple example. So let's add some shadow to our H2, right? So I'm just gonna say text shadow, and already you can see there's so many uh properties that we can use, right? So most of the time you barely use half of those, right? So this is just to show you. So this is the um, horizontal and this is the vertical, all right? So I'm gonna put 2 pixel by 2 pixel. Okay. So when I refresh this, you can see your header now has a shadow, right? Horizontal and vertical. And if you want, you can add a color to it so it becomes more legible. So let's say red. Okay, so you can see the red shadow in there. Great. So that is your text uh, shadow. So, and then let's look at your fonts, right? So always choose the right font for your website. That is very important. That shows you how readable your web pages will be. Uh, and it's very important for you to choose the right font to using. There are various, and I got this from W3 Schools, font families, right? In here, you can see that we have the serif font, have a small stroke at the edge of each letter. Like you can see the small strokes at the edge of each letter. Then we have the sans serif, which is sans meaning without, right? Without serif. So you can see this one here doesn't have those strokes. And then we have the monospace fonts, and they all have the same fixed width. And then we have the cursive and fantasy, right? So if you go through it, it gives you how those fonts look like and which ones you want to use, right? So all you need to do is to determine which font you want to use, which font family, and then add it to your styling so that you get the right one. So let's just take a couple and see how they look like. So the first one, and I'm gonna do it in the, let's say the P, right? So let me just say fonts style. Okay, so let's do this. So I just want the font family to be Times New Roman and sans serif, right? So this is serif. So you can see serif has those extensions at the edge, right? So this is the default, right? So let's choose something else. So let's say I do, sorry, refresh this. Let me see, let me just choose. So let's say the Arial. This is without the serif. So if I refresh this, you can see that this is without those extensions, right? So you can choose and pick and choose which of the fonts you want to use. So let's choose a third type, uh, Lucida. Good. And then refresh this. You can see that the style has changed. So if you go and look at it, you can find out one that fits uh, your the style of your page. Now, I think you might ask, why do we have so many like fonts uh, separated by commas in here? And the reason is because we have to have fallback fonts, right? And fonts are universally installed across all browsers, so all browsers have fonts. However, it's not 100% guarantee, right? So there's a chance that a font may not be installed properly, or so then you might mess your styling, right? So the fallback font means that you should add a list of similar backup fonts in case the first or the second doesn't is not installed. You can always fall back to others, right? This is very important. So you can see here that the first one was Lucida San, and then we have the Lucida San regular, and all, and so and so and so and so that you have a fallback strategy. We also have the font style property, and this is used to specify the italic style. Do you want it italic? Do you want it normal? Do you want it oblique? And those are all the font styles that you can select. So let's add some font styles to this. All right. So I'm going to add a font style and say I want an italic. So you can see you can have normal, oblique, italic, right? So I italize this, right? So you can also have the normal and oblique style. So let's see how the oblique is. Oblique. It's similar, but it's not. So there's the same, and I kind of like the italic, right? So I'm gonna keep this. Yeah. So the italic and the oblique are very similar, uh, but it's less supported. Oblique is less supported, so mostly you use italic, right? And the normal is normal, right? So that is the font style, and then we have the font weight, which tells you the weight of your fonts. So you can set bold, bolder if you wanted a bold fonts. So bold, right? If you want it bolder than it is already, even you can have bolder, bolder than the bold, right? And there are certain fonts that are already bold by nature, so it depends on what you want, right? So you can have your font weight as normal also if you want it normal, lighter, normal. So this is normal. Okay. So that is your font weight. Okay, so that is it. So and then another one that we can use is your font size. So depending on how big, small you want your font to be, the property that you should look at, it will be your font size. Okay, and then and I'll not do a lot after this because you can explore it on your own. So the font size is sets the size of your text, right? So for the headers, always use the correct H1 to H6 headings, and for paragraphs, always use the P for your paragraphs, right? And those have default sizing for your text, right? But if you want to set it, all you need to do is to put the font size and then set it to maybe 40 pixels, and then you have your font size. That is too big, right? So always set your font size. Okay, you can also set it in EM. We'll talk about that in later, right? So yes, so this is your font size property. There are other fonts that are not standard in HTML that you want to use, like you have Google fonts, and you can also use that if you want to. And the way we use those fonts are you have to first find the link to the style, right? So in the head, I'm gonna have this link, right? And I'm gonna have my style sheet, okay, and then href, and I'm gonna figure out this href. Okay, so we have this link here, which is a Google API, and then the font family is Sophia, right? So we can use this. So here I can also say that I can now have my font family and set it to Sophia, and then fall back to sans serif. Okay, so when I refresh this, I have my Sophia, right? So that, and you can somebody might be asking, why do I have font family here and font family here? The one that is going to be effective is the last one that is red. So you can see that this was red first, but this was the last one to read, and that's why it took this font style. Okay, so that is how we load from Google fonts. If we wanted to load another type of font, you can also load it, right? For example, if you didn't want to load Sophia, but you wanted to load another one called we call it tree wrong, right? You can load it like that, and then in here, I'm gonna just call it in here instead of Sophia. I'm gonna call tree wrong. Okay, just like that. So if I refresh this, that is the tree wrong style. So if you wanted to use multiple, not just one, then you don't need to specify the font. You can just call just the entire style sheet, and then that should work, right? So still, if I wanted to use this and I refresh it, it still sees this. So then we are good. There's one more cool stuff that we can add to the Google fonts, and we call that the font effects, right? So, what Google has allowed us to do is to add effects to your fonts, right? First, in order to do that, the first thing that we need to do is we need first to identify the, okay, so in here, let's first add family Sophia, right? Let's use, because that's what we want to use, right? So we're going to use the Sophia, and then we are gonna enable, so we are gonna do and effects, and then the type of effects, which in this case would be fire, right? So we are gonna have the fire effect on the Sophia. So I'm gonna change this to Sophia, right? So we can have that effect. The next thing, in this case, this is not all what you have to do. The next thing that you have to do is to create a class, right, for the element that is going to be using this, right? So, and then, so let's create a class. So what I want to do is to kind of use it on the H1, right? Our H1, H2 header. So I'm going to create a class right here, or just so we see the difference. Let's copy this, and then I'm going to create, instead of an H2, an H3 instead, and then I'm going to say fonts, Google Fonts with effects. Okay, so we have this. So I have to create a class, and the name of the class has to start with fonts dash effects, dash and then the name, right? Fire, right? So I'm gonna have font dot effect dash and then the effect name, and then you continue. So that's how we name the class. So when I refresh it, that's what you get, right? When I refresh it, you see the Google font with effects, and there is a fire effect behind it. That is good. That is really cool. Uh, you can also do a lot, right? You can have neon, outline, shadow, multiple, all that, right? So you can look into it if you want to, right? But there is a lot that you can do with this. So if you wanted multiple effects onto Fire, for example, you wanted to be able to have multiple effects that you can use. Again, what you have to do is after selecting the font, the effects is equal to uh, you can add multiple, meaning Fire, right? And then you can add neon, and then you can add outline, and then you can add emboss, and then you can add shadow multiple. Okay, so we can add any of these. And so now I can have my class. I can have my, I'm going to create multiple elements using any of them. So I have my class effect neon. Great. I'm going to have my second one. I'm going to call this class effect outline. I'm going to have my third one. I'm going to call this class effect emboss. And then I am going to call this the shadow multiple. So we're going to see how both of them look like, right? And so when I refresh this again, you can see all the different effects that we are getting from the Google font effects. Finally, and I think I have gone way above the time, so I'm going to end on this note. So finally, the shorthand for font, right? You don't have to have all these properties, but you just want to have one. It goes, the shorthand property is, the first one is the font style, your font variant, your font weight, your font size, and then your font family. So you can put all that in one line just by using the property font. And then, so I'm going to have my font style, right? Which in this case will be italic, right? And then space, and then my font variant, let's say small caps. And then I want a font weight of bold, and then a font size, let's say 12 pixel, and then font family, let's say Georgia, right? And then my fallback, sorry. Okay, so that is the shorthand. So if I refresh this, you can see that the font just changed. So thank you. I know this was a little longer than we used to, and I'm so sorry, but it had a lot of content. And I hope that you practice this because the more you practice, the more you know. Thank you for watching and see you in the next lesson. Bye.